Hi, I'm Brian Chase, Director of Digital Forensics here at ArcherHall. Today I'm here to talk to you about location data. Location data is becoming more and more popular in a wide variety of cases. We see it more often in the criminal context where the prosecution is trying to use location data to show that a defendant was at the scene of the crime, but it's also used by the defense in those cases to show that the defendant was not there at the time of a crime. We see it used in both civil and criminal cases to confirm the story of a victim or witness. We also see it used to discredit a victim or witness to show that they were not at a scene, did not observe the events that they're discussing. It comes up in plaintiff cases, car accident cases, personal injury type cases, to show how long a defendant may have been driving prior to the crash, to show which bar a plaintiff may have been drinking at in a dram shop case. There's a lot of uses for location data in modern litigation. There's two main types of location data that we'll be discussing today. The first is GPS data, and the second is cell site location information. GPS data is far more accurate than cell site location information, but getting GPS data can be a lot more difficult. If the individual you're interested in uses an Android phone, and they have location services turned on, you'll be able to find their complete location history in Google through what's called Google Timeline. So if that individual is your client, you simply have your client log in to Google Timeline, which is currently at maps.google.com/timeline. But Google sometimes changes their URL, so you can always just search for Google Timeline. Once there, you log into the account and you can see a complete history of everywhere that phone has traveled. And it is incredibly detailed. The Google Timeline will show you things like when the individual was walking versus driving, where they stopped, how long they stopped for. So if you're looking at a person and you see their timeline, you might see that they walked to lunch at noon, and then they were at, say, McDonald's for the next 30 minutes, and then that they walked home from there. All of that level of detail will show up in a Google Timeline, as will any photographs they took during that time. Photographs, pictures from cell phones, by default have location data embedded in the picture. So when you take a picture with your cell phone, it puts your latitude and longitude, your GPS coordinates, into that picture, and therefore you can look at the picture later to see exactly where it was taken. So pictures are another great source of GPS location data, even if you don't have something like Google Timeline. If you do have Google Timeline, those pictures will show up in the timeline. So you'll be able to see that the individual walked somewhere, took some pictures, and then walked somewhere else, and those pictures will be visible in the timeline. But even on the Apple side in iOS, you can still get GPS data off of a picture. There's other sources of GPS information as well. For example, modern cars all use GPS. Some of them store that GPS for periods of time. So you can potentially get GPS information off of a vehicle. Newer Fords, for example, store data such as the location of every gear shift, every door lock and unlock, every door open, and they periodically store it while driving. So you can get a picture of where that vehicle has been. However, that data does get overwritten relatively quickly. On a normal usage for a vehicle, that data may only be there for about 30 days. GPS data is very difficult to obtain off of a cell phone. However, there are a number of apps on a phone that may store GPS information. For example, if you've ever applied for a new auto insurance policy, the carrier will often offer you a discount if you install their app on your phone. So for Progressive, for example, they use an app called DriveSense. And what you can do is look at that app, and it monitors when you're driving, how fast you're going, whether you use your phone or not while driving, any sudden braking or any hard acceleration. And you can get that kind of data off of the app on the phone, even if there otherwise wouldn't have been GPS information on that device. Most of the auto insurance companies have their own app. So if you're dealing with a person who has a relatively new auto insurance policy, there's a good chance that they might have this app in order to get themselves some discounts. And that app will have all of the information about where they have driven. Most of the time, the users are able to uninstall the app after 6 months, and their discount remains permanent after that. So you often do not see these apps on phones for long periods of time. There are other apps that do stay on the phones longer. For example, some people use an app to track every drive that they take. And they use that often for business purposes, so it keeps track of their mileage, makes it easy to mark their mileage on their taxes at the end of the year. So those kind of apps will store drives, at least for long periods of time. They may not store all GPS information, such as when the individual is biking or walking, but at least drives you'll be able to get from the app. There's also devices you can plug into the car's OBD port that track GPS information and put that on a map for the same kind of purposes, to be able to track mileage and use it in taxes at the end of the year, or sometimes to bill clients for travel time. GPS information is highly accurate, as we've all become accustomed to it and using things like Google Maps or Apple Maps for directions. On the other side of things is cell site location information, which is not as precise as GPS data. However, cell site location information is much more readily available than GPS data, which is why a lot of law enforcement uses it in order to determine location of a suspect. Cell site location information, or CSLI, comes from the records your phone carrier keeps with the towers. So every time you use your phone connects to a nearby tower. That tower connects to a switch, which then connects to the network, whether that's AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, or Sprint. The carriers then track that information, and you can request that data from the carriers. So for example, if I were to make a phone call right now, my phone would connect to the tower it believes is the best signal. And my phone is on T-Mobile, so I would see that the records from T-Mobile would show which tower I connected to, and also a direction from the tower. A typical cell tower has 3 antennae on it. They form kind of a triangle around the tower. Each sector, each antenna is called a sector. Each sector points in a given direction. Typically, you see those 3 sectors around the tower so that the tower covers 360 degrees around it. But that's not always the configuration. When you get the records from the carrier, they will show you which direction the antenna is pointing, and that gives you the center point of that sector. So let's assume that a tower has 3 sectors, sectors 1, 2, and 3, and sector 1 has what's called an azimuth, its direction of 0 degrees. That would be due north. So if you see a call placed on a tower using sector 1 with an azimuth of 0 degrees, what you know is that phone connected to that tower using its north-facing antenna. That north-facing antenna likely has a beam width of 120 degrees. The beam width is just kind of the coverage area of the tower. So if you think of a triangle coming out from the tower, that space between the lines of that pie-shaped wedge that would be drawn from the tower is 120 degrees. So on our sample phone call using an antenna pointed due north, that antenna is covering anywhere from 300 degrees to 60 degrees. What that record then tells you is the phone was somewhere north of that tower, going out 300 degrees on one side and 60 degrees on the other. What it does not tell us is precisely where the phone was. There could be a lot of area covered by that tower. That signal may go out for miles. That kind of information, that precise location of the phone, is not there in cell site location information, which is why it's less precise than GPS. But if you're trying to show that somebody was in one town and not another, cell site location information can be very helpful. It's very good at ruling out possibilities. For example, I'm based in Tucson. If I were to get my cell site location information for today, it's clearly going to establish that I am not in California or New Mexico or even in Phoenix, Arizona. However, it's not going to be able to show that I'm sitting here in my office right now versus down the street at the coffee shop or a few blocks away at the courthouse. Cell site location information is not that precise. It can be useful in a number of situations, especially when GPS data is not available. Um, but the other thing to keep in mind with cell site location information is it disappears quickly. Some carriers only keep this data for 1 year. So if you don't act quickly to get this data, it could be gone. Once you have any kind of GPS or cell site location information, you'll probably need an expert witness to be able to explain it. While GPS is relatively simple, we're all familiar with it, interpretation of GPS records can be a little bit more challenging. And cell site location information is particularly challenging to map and understand. So if you want to present this kind of evidence to a jury, make sure you have a witness that understands how this technology works and will be able to help you lay the foundation, authenticate it, and provide an opinion that will survive any doubt or challenges at trial. If you want to use location information for your next case, give us a call. We'll be glad to help you understand your options for GPS and cell site data and help you work your way through the data once you receive it. Thank you.